Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm really glad to have you here. Welcome back. We are doing a quick meal prepping session on a Sunday afternoon, and I'll be doing a couple of recipes using 3 kilos of mincemeat. Mincemeat here arrives once a week every Wednesday, so I make sure to use it as soon as I get it, and I'll be using 3 kilos, dividing them up into 3 staple recipes to be used in stored in the freezer and also to be used all week round. We are a large family, so keep them in mind. I will be doing large quantities of the recipes that I will do, and I mostly don't rely on recipes as in the quantities and the cups and the tablespoons. I just mix through and just use it that way. But if you're interested in the recipe, I will place some links in the description box below if you want to follow that up. So I'll be starting by dividing the 3 kilos into 1 kilo portion, and I will do 1 kilo of minced meat, cooked minced meat filling. All I have to do is just put the 1 kilo of minced meat on the stove and put it in the stovetop on high heat, cook it through along with some diced onion, some minced garlic, fresh herbs like parsley, dried herbs like rosemary also work best. We are also talking about herbs that are anti-inflammatory, herbs that really help to give the aroma, the taste, as well as the nutritional value. So I'll be cooking them through along with a little bit of turmeric. It gives it that really vibrant good color, and I'll also be using a tint of like a pinch of black pepper. It really helps to activate that curcumin in turmeric that gives it anti-inflammatory, gets rid of the smell and also the oiliness that is in the minced meat. I'll also do the second recipe, which is basically hamburger patties. So I also rely on this recipe by making some meatballs and also by making some kebabs. Same recipe, you don't have to change anything, and I honestly don't like adding breadcrumbs to my meatballs. But we're going to start off by using this really nice hamburger patty tool that I've purchased. So I don't really know the correct name for this, but I've just bought this, and I'll be assembling it, washing it, drying it, and then I'll also use some plastic wrap in order to help with assembling the or forming the patties so it doesn't stick to the actual tool itself. So I'll be making a big batch of hamburger patties. If I do have any leftover from the patty mix, I will use it to make either meatballs or just some rolled thin kebabs that will also be frozen. As soon as I form the hamburgers, I will lay them on some tray with baking sheet, and I will lay them separately to be frozen in the freezer. That way, as soon as they freeze through, usually takes about an hour or 2, I will take them out, put them in Ziploc bags, label them accordingly, or I can use a freezable container, a freezer safe container, and that way I have kebabs, I have meatballs, and I have some hamburger patties in the freezer. When I want to cook these through, all I have to do is just take as much as I want for either dinner or lunch and put them straight off from the freezer to the oven on 200 Celsius for about 10 to 15 minutes. They'll cook through, put them on hamburger buns ready to go, or I'll put them on some pita bread. I can shred them up or use them in any recipe that I like. Another hack that I also rely on is whenever I want to use sweet potato. Now I use sweet potato as part of many of the dishes that I do on a weekly basis, so I just take a bunch of sweet potatoes and just use the fork to just punch holes through to allow air in, and I put them in the oven 200 Celsius for about 25 minutes to the most, and they'll be ready to cook through. They'll peel off, I'll peel off the skin, put them in the fridge, or just use them to in different kinds of recipes. They store very well in the fridge for a few days, and then I could also make baby food for them for my baby and toddler. So another meal prep packing that I also rely on is using eggplants. So eggplants have been on sale, so I bought a couple of eggplants and I've washed them, and now I'm just slicing them as thinly as I can and salting them, layering them up and starting to salt them using Himalayan salt. You can also use sea salt. What the salt does in this case is it also gives them that taste, gives them that nutrition from the minerals that are in the salt. But what it really does here is it just takes out as much liquid as possible from the eggplant, so that when I come to saute them or fry them using oil on the stove top, they won't absorb as much oil and they'll cook through beautifully. They'll also be ready to go as soon as I saute them on the stove top. I'll start by putting them on some baking sheet and freezing them that way. So we'll get back to the eggplant. While the eggplant is salted, and I put it aside for about 10 to 15 minutes until it starts releasing its liquid and its waters, I am making a simple pizza bread dough. So this dough can be used for any pizza base, any pastries, as well as some bread and pita bread as well. So I've just added some flour, some Himalayan salt, yeast, and I will put the recipe in the description box below if you guys are interested. And while I am waiting for the dough to rise, I'm going to make a quick batch of shredded cheese. So we rely on buying cheese in bulk. Whenever it is on sale, of course, we freeze the rest, and we also shred the cheese. So I like to shred the cheese myself. I don't like to buy shredded cheese most of the time because shredded cheese does have preservatives, and I would like to avoid preservatives as much as possible. So I just tend to buy cheese in bulk and just shred it and put it in the freezer, lay it on a baking sheet and freeze it that way. As soon as it's frozen through, I'll take it and put it in either Ziploc bags or containers to be used in any recipe that requires shredded cheese. And now, as I'm going through the freezer and just cleaning it through, I've also realized that I've got a batch from a batch of bone broth that have been frozen in silicone molds. Now, if you've noticed in my previous videos, I like to bake bone broth in bulk and freeze it in silicone molds, portion sizes, so that way I will have bone broth all throughout the month. And this is chicken bone broth, which has been frozen using all sorts of herbs and spices that are anti-inflammatory. We are in winter right now, so we need as much immune boosting liquids as much as possible. I do not use any store-bought vegetable broth or beef or chicken broth, so I rely on bone broth most of the time whenever I do any salty or savory dish that requires liquid. I like to also add bone broth cubes. So I've just removed the bone broth from silicone molds, as you can see, and I'll be placing in the freezer, and I have a whole tray in the freezer just for bone broth. So we have all sorts of silicone bone broth molds that have been frozen in silicone molds that I tend to rely on. So the mincemeat filling has been cooked through, and I will be just layering. As soon as it's cooled down, I will layer it on top of some baking sheet and freezing it that way. It takes an hour or two for it to be completely frozen. I'll just start to cut it up and place it in a container. That way, whenever I need mincemeat to do any sort of omelette style, any pizza or any pastries, I can just take whatever portion I need out of the mincemeat filling. So I like to use the mincemeat filling in many different ways. I like to add it on pizza. I like to just use it in sandwiches, just take it out of the freezer and just wait for it to defrost and use it in different sorts of sandwiches along with sweet chili sauce. Absolutely amazing on pita bread. I also like to use it in different fillings for pastries and all sorts of other savory recipes, which we will talk about. And now let's get started by making the laham bajin filling. All we need is some mincemeat, some parsley, fresh parsley, as well as some diced capsicum. Red capsicum works best. I'm using about half a cup of pomegranate molasses. Absolutely amazing, really gives it that savory, that sweet and sour taste. And this will be the filling for my pizza dough that I've done. So while I've done the filling for the laham bajin and I just mixed it through, I'm waiting for it to marinate. This is optional. Now we're coming back to the eggplants, which have released their liquid, and I'm just washing them through with water and then just patting them dry using a paper towel. That way I've just put in a little bit of olive oil on medium heat, and I've just layered out the eggplant, waited for it to cook through. As it's cooking through, I'm going to keep an eye on it. Keep in mind, it will take about a minute or two on each side for the eggplant to be cooked through on medium to low heat. So that way I will go to the pizza dough, which has already started to rise, and it's been about 20 minutes. I have just formed the dough into individual portions, individual balls, and I've just used a little bit of flour to roll the dough as thin as possible and add a thin layer of our pomegranate lamb ajin filling, which we've made earlier. I placed it on a preheated oven, 200 Celsius, for about 15 to 20 minutes. So once all the batches of lamb ajin have been cooked through, and here I've made another dough made from wholemeal flour compared to the spelt white flour that I've used on the original dough, and I made a large batch of lamb ajin pastries which have all been cooked through. I'm going to start layering the cooked lamb ajin on a baking sheet tray with some baking sheet to separate the layers, and freezing them individually. As soon as they're frozen through, I'm going to do the exact same by placing them either in a Ziploc bag or in a freezer safe container, and they'll be ready to go whenever we feel like eating lamb ajin. We just take a few of the cooked pastries out from the freezer and just defrost and eat or heat in the oven that way for a few minutes, and they'll be ready to go along with some mint yogurt dip. Absolutely amazing. Please do try this if you haven't tried it before. It's really nice, and this also works for many of the different pastries, which we will also talk about and discuss in future videos. Today's meal prep session took about 2 hours from start to finish, so I'm really proud of the time and how much I got to do during that time. I multitasked, and it saved me a lot of time all week long, and we relied on the freezer meals that we've done throughout the week for most of our meals. So the whole batch of eggplant slices have been cooked through, and I am just layering them up on a baking sheet, separating them away from the lamb ajin pastries, and I'll be freezing these through. It takes about an hour or two for them to be completely frozen. I'll take them out and I will put them in a freezable container and use them in all sorts of recipes and salsas, along with rice or some burgul or couscous. Absolutely amazing with some tomato based salsa. I will also be making a recipe where I get to use the mincemeat filling that I've done and just fill the eggplant, roll them up and put them in a tomato base in the oven. It's a super quick and easy recipe that's also keto friendly. We just reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in more meal prep sessions for keto, as well as for breakfast, lunch and dinner, and a toddler friendly meal prep session, please do let me know. I will try my best to include more meal prep sessions in the future that will be as condensed and as easy and flexible as possible. And if you are new to the channel and you enjoy today's content, please do subscribe. We'll be doing more content on tips and tricks that have been tried and tested in our family. Stay tuned and have a great day. Take care and bye bye.